The flames had already consumed half the valley by the time Garrett Grayson realized she might not make it through the night alive. She pressed her hand against the scorched earth, feeling the heat radiating through the ground itself as smoke billowed across the darkening South Dakota sky. The year was 1883, and Hill City had been experiencing the driest summer in recorded memory. Every rancher in the Black Hills had been praying for rain, but the heavens remained stubbornly clear, and now their worst nightmare had come to pass. A wildfire, sparked by a lightning strike 3 days prior, had swept through the pine forests with terrifying speed, devouring everything in its path. Garrett had been riding back from the neighboring ranch where she had been helping with the harvest, when she saw the wall of fire racing toward her across the grassland. Her horse, a bay mare named Cassie, had spooked at the first smell of smoke and thrown her before bolting into the distance. Now Garrett was alone, trapped in a small rocky outcropping as flames surrounded her on 3 sides, the heat so intense it felt like standing inside an oven. She pulled her neckerchief over her nose and mouth, trying to filter out the worst of the smoke, but her eyes streamed with tears and her lungs burned with each breath. At 22 years old, Garrett had thought she had faced every challenge the frontier could throw at her. She had lost her parents to typhoid fever when she was 16, run their small ranch alone for 2 years before selling it, and spent the last 4 years working as a ranch hand wherever she could find employment. She was tough, capable, and independent. But fire was an enemy that could not be reasoned with or outworked. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular, coughing as smoke filled her throat. "Please, someone." As if in answer to her prayer, she heard the thunder of hoofbeats cutting through the roar of the flames. Garrett squinted through the smoke and saw a rider approaching at breakneck speed, his horse leaping over fallen logs and dodging burning branches with incredible agility. The man wore a dark hat, pulled low over his eyes, and even through the haze, she could see the determination in the set of his shoulders. He reined his horse to a sliding stop just feet from where she crouched, and in one fluid motion, he dismounted and was at her side. "Can you walk?" he shouted over the deafening crackle of the fire. "Yes, but there is nowhere to go," Garrett shouted back, gesturing at the wall of flames that seemed to grow closer with each passing second. The cowboy looked around quickly, his jaw set in a hard line. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark brown hair visible beneath his hat and eyes that shone with intelligence and fierce resolve. "There is a creek bed about half a mile east," he said. "The water dried up a month ago, but the banks are high enough to shelter us if we can make it there before the fire closes that route too." "That is suicide," Garrett said, pointing at the flames that already blocked the eastern path. "We will never get through." He grabbed her hand, his grip strong and steady, and looked directly into her eyes. "You will see morning, I promise on my name. Trust me." Something in his voice, in the absolute certainty of his words, made Garrett nod. He pulled her to her feet and practically lifted her onto his horse, a magnificent black stallion that seemed remarkably calm despite the inferno raging around them. The cowboy swung up behind her, his arms coming around her as he took the reins. "Hold on tight," he commanded, and then they were moving. The ride was the most terrifying experience of Garrett's life. They raced directly toward a section of the fire line where the flames seemed slightly less intense, and at the last moment, the cowboy urged his horse into a leap that carried them through a gap in the burning grass. Sparks flew up around them, and Garrett felt the searing heat against her skin, but somehow they made it through. The stallion's hooves pounded against the hard earth as they wove between patches of fire, the cowboy guiding his mount with expert precision. Twice Garrett thought they were done for. Once when a burning tree began to fall directly in their path, and the cowboy had to swerve so sharply she nearly lost her grip, and again when the horse stumbled over hidden rocks and almost went down. But each time, the animal recovered, and the man behind her never faltered in his determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but could have only been minutes, they reached the dry creek bed. The cowboy guided the horse down the steep bank, and the moment they were below ground level, the intensity of the heat decreased noticeably. The creek bed wound through the landscape like a scar, its banks rising 10 feet high on either side, offering protection from the worst of the flames above. The cowboy dismounted first, then helped Garrett down. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand, and without thinking, she grabbed onto his arm for support. He steadied her with his hand on her back, and for a moment, they just stood there, breathing hard, as the fire raged around them above ground level. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Find the deepest part of the creek bed and wait it out there." Garrett nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Together, they led the horse along the winding creek bed, moving away from the most intense part of the fire. The smoke was still thick, making every breath a struggle, but at least they were not surrounded by flames anymore. They found a spot where the creek bed curved sharply, creating a natural alcove in the bank. The cowboy tied his horse nearby, then pulled a canteen from his saddle and handed it to Garrett. "Drink slowly," he instructed. The water was warm but wonderful, and Garrett took several small sips, feeling it soothe her burning throat. She handed the canteen back to him, and he drank as well, his eyes never stopping their constant scan of their surroundings, always alert for danger. "Thank you," Garrett finally managed to say. "You saved my life." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw his expression soften slightly. "Could not leave you out there to burn," he said simply. "Name is Samuel Quincy. Most folks call me Sam." "Garrett Grayson," she replied, extending her hand. He shook it, his grip warm and firm despite the circumstances. "That is an unusual name for a woman," Sam observed, not unkindly. "My father wanted a son," Garrett explained, a familiar explanation she had given countless times throughout her life. "When I turned out to be a girl, he gave me the name anyway, said I would need to be tough as any man to make it in this world." "He was right about that," Sam said, settling down with his back against the creek bank. "Takes a certain kind of strength to survive out here. You work one of the ranches near Hill City?" "I was working at the Morrison Spread, helping with their harvest," Garrett said, sitting down beside him. Above them, they could hear the fire continuing its rampage across the valley, but for now, they were safe. "I have been taking whatever work I can find since I sold my parents' ranch 4 years back." "Morrison," Sam repeated thoughtfully. "That is the big spread about 10 miles south of town, right? I heard old Thomas Morrison runs a fair operation." "He does," Garrett confirmed. "Pays honest wages and does not mind that I am a woman, as long as I pull my weight. What about you? I have not seen you around Hill City before." "Just arrived 2 weeks ago," Sam explained. "Been working at the Bartlett Ranch, breaking horses mostly. I am a drifter, I suppose. Move from place to place, take work where I can find it. Been all over the territories, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. Ended up in South Dakota, following rumors of good work in the Black Hills." "You picked quite an introduction to the area," Garrett said wryly, coughing again as a fresh wave of smoke drifted down into the creek bed. Sam pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wet it with water from his canteen, then handed it to her. "Here, keep this over your face. It will help with the smoke." Garrett took it gratefully, pressing the damp cloth over her nose and mouth. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire rage above them. The sky visible through the creek bed had turned an angry orange-red, and ash fell like snow, coating everything in a fine gray powder. "How did you find me?" Garrett asked eventually, needing to hear a human voice in the chaos. "Saw your horse running wild without a rider," Sam said. "Recognized it as one of Morrison's animals. Figured whoever had been riding it was in trouble. Tracked back along the route and saw you trapped in those rocks. Nearly did not make it in time." "But you did," Garrett said softly. "You kept your promise. You said I would see morning." "Night is not over yet," Sam pointed out, but there was a hint of a smile in his voice. "We still have a few hours to get through before dawn." As if to emphasize his point, a particularly large pine tree crashed down somewhere above them, sending a shower of sparks cascading into the night sky. Sam's horse whinnied nervously, and he stood to check on the animal, running a soothing hand down its neck and speaking in low, calming tones. Garrett watched him with growing curiosity. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in their own skin, someone who had spent their entire life outdoors and would not know what to do with himself in a city. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a working man, but they were gentle as they stroked his horse's muzzle. "Your horse is beautiful," Garrett said. "What is his name?" "Midnight," Sam replied. "Raised him from a colt, 5 years old now. Best horse I ever owned. He has gotten me out of more than a few tight situations." "I can believe it," Garrett said. "The way he jumped through that gap in the flames. I have never seen anything like it." "He trusts me," Sam said simply. "And I trust him. That is what matters." The hours passed slowly. The fire continued to burn above them, but but gradually the intensity seemed to lessen. The roar that had been so deafening earlier became a steady crackling, and the heat, while still oppressive, no longer felt quite as life-threatening. Sam and Garrett took turns keeping watch, though neither of them truly slept. They talked in low voices, sharing stories of their lives, their dreams, their losses. Garrett found herself opening up to this stranger in ways she rarely did with anyone. Perhaps it was the extremity of their situation, the brush with death that stripped away the usual social niceties and pretenses. Or perhaps it was something about Sam himself, the way he listened with genuine interest, the way his eyes reflected understanding even when their experiences were vastly different. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, the youngest of 5 brothers, how he had left home at 16 seeking adventure and had been wandering ever since. He spoke of the places he had seen, the people he had met, the hard lessons the frontier had taught him. There was a loneliness beneath his words, a searching quality that Garrett recognized because she felt it too. She told him about her parents, how much she still missed them, how running their ranch alone had been both the hardest and most satisfying time of her life. She explained how she had finally sold it when the debt became too much to manage, how she had vowed to save enough money to buy her own place again someday. She spoke of her dreams of having a real home again, a place where she belonged, where she could put down roots. "Do you ever get tired of drifting?" Garrett asked him as the first hints of gray began to appear in the smoke-choked sky above them. Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," he finally admitted. "But I never found a reason to stop, never found a place that felt like it could be home or a person worth staying for." There was something in the way he looked at her when he said the last part that made Garrett's heart skip a beat. She told herself it was just the adrenaline, the relief of surviving the night. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something had passed between them during those dark hours in the creek bed, some connection that went beyond simple gratitude for a life saved. As dawn finally broke, they climbed carefully up the creek bank to survey the damage. The landscape had been transformed into a charred wasteland. Everything that had been green and alive was now black and dead. Smoke still rose from countless smoldering patches, and the acrid smell was overwhelming. But the main fire had passed, pushed northeast by the wind toward the less populated regions of the Black Hills. "We should head back to Hill City," Sam said. "People will be worried, and they will need all hands to help with the aftermath." Garrett nodded, though her heart sank at the thought of returning to town, to normal life where she and Sam would go their separate ways. But she pushed those thoughts aside. They were alive, and that was what mattered. The ride back took several hours on midnight, with both of them sharing the saddle. They had to take a circuitous route to avoid areas still burning or too dangerous to cross. As they traveled, they passed other survivors emerging from whatever shelters they had found. Some had been fortunate enough to reach the town before the fire arrived. Others had hidden in root cellars, wells, or like them, in natural depressions in the land. Hill City itself had been spared the worst of the fire, protected by a series of fire breaks the townspeople had frantically dug the day before. But the outlying ranches had not been so lucky. As Sam and Garrett rode through the outskirts of town, they saw the skeletal remains of barns and houses, livestock pens reduced to ash, acres of grazing land turned to wasteland. The Morrison Ranch, when they finally reached it, was a scene of controlled chaos. Thomas Morrison, a grizzled man in his 60s with a wild white beard, was directing his remaining ranch hands in assessing the damage and rounding up scattered livestock. When he saw Garrett riding in with Sam, his weathered face broke into a relieved grin. "Garrett!" he called out, striding over to them. "Thank God. When Cassie came back without you, we feared the worst. Sarah has been beside herself with worry." Sarah Morrison, Thomas's daughter, and Garrett's closest friend, came running from the main house at the sound of voices. She was a petite woman with dark curls and warm brown eyes. And when she saw Garrett, she let out a cry of relief and pulled her down from the horse into a fierce hug. "Do not ever scare me like that again," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought we had lost you." "I would have been lost if not for Sam," Garrett said, gesturing to the cowboy who had dismounted and was standing a respectful distance away. "He rode through the fire to reach me and got us both to safety." Thomas Morrison turned his attention to Sam, his shrewd eyes assessing the younger man carefully. "Sam Quincy from the Bartlett place, right? I have heard good things about your work with horses." "Yes, sir," Sam said, removing his hat respectfully. Just glad I could help." "More than help. You saved one of my best workers," Thomas said. "That deserves more than just thanks. You need a job? I lost 2 of my men in the fire, and I could use someone with your skills." Sam glanced at Garrett, something unreadable in his expression. "I appreciate the offer, sir. I will think on it." "You do that," Thomas said. "In the meantime, both of you need food, water, and rest. Sarah, take Garrett inside and make sure she is all right. Mr. Quincy, you are welcome to stay in the bunkhouse tonight. No sense riding all the way back to Bartlett's place in your condition." Sam agreed, and the next few hours were a blur of activity. Garrett allowed Sarah to fuss over her, tending to the minor burns on her arms and making sure she ate and drank. She took a bath to wash away the soot and ash, and when she finally looked at herself in the mirror, she was shocked by her appearance. Her face was streaked with dirt and smoke stains, her hair was a tangled mess, and her eyes were red and bloodshot. She looked like she had been through a war, which, in a way, she supposed she had. That evening, after a dinner where she could barely taste the food due to lingering smoke damage to her senses, Garrett found herself drawn outside. The sun was setting, painting the smoke-haze sky in shades of purple and deep red. She walked toward the paddock where Midnight was stabled, not entirely surprised to find Sam there, checking on his horse. "Could not sleep?" he asked as she approached. "Too much on my mind," Garrett admitted. "You?" "Same." He ran a curry comb down Midnight's flank with practiced strokes. "Been thinking about Morrison's offer. Are you going to take it?" Garrett tried to keep her voice casual, but she could not quite hide her interest in his answer. Sam set down the curry comb and turned to face her fully. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you want me to stay," he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Garrett's heart began to race, and she found herself stepping closer to him, drawn by an invisible force she could not explain and did not want to resist. "I do not even know you," she said, but it came out as a whisper, not the protest she had intended. "You know me better than most people I have known for years," Sam countered. "Last night, in that creek bed, we were just 2 people stripped down to who we really are. No pretenses, no walls. And what I learned about you, Garrett Grayson, made me think that maybe I finally found that reason to stop drifting." "Sam," Garrett breathed, and she did not know what else to say. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was crazy, that you could not fall for someone in the span of a single night, that she barely knew this man. But her heart was telling a different story entirely. "I know it is fast," Sam said, taking a step closer to her. "I know it does not make a lot of sense. But I have spent 10 years wandering, and in one night with you, I felt more alive, more connected, more like I had found something real than in all those years combined. So I'm asking you straight out, do you feel it too?" Garrett looked up at him, at his honest face and his earnest eyes, and she knew she could not lie. "Yes," she said. "I feel it too. It terrifies me, but I feel it." "Then let me stay," Sam said. "Let me take Morrison's job and see where this goes. Maybe it will crash and burn worse than that fire we just survived, but maybe it will be something incredible. Are you willing to take that chance?" For a long moment, Garrett just stared at him, her mind racing through all the possible consequences, all the ways this could go wrong. But then she thought about the certainty in his voice when he had promised she would see morning, the way he had risked his life to save hers, the connection they had forged in the darkest hours of night. And she knew her answer. "Yes," she said. "I am willing." The smile that broke across Sam's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was both tentative and tender. "Thank you," he said softly. They stood there in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, neither of them quite ready to let go and return to the world of other people and expectations. Finally, Garrett laughed softly, shaking her head at the absurdity of it all. "Sarah is never going to believe this," she said. "Yesterday I was a ranch hand with no prospects beyond the next paycheck. Today I am standing here with a man I just met, and it feels like the most right thing in the world." "Life works in mysterious ways," Sam said. "My ma used to say that God moves in his own time, and we just have to be ready when he does." "Was your mother a religious woman?" "Very," Sam said. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed to find a woman with a strong spine and a good heart. You have both." Garrett felt herself blush, grateful for the darkness that hid it. You barely know that. I know what I saw last night, Sam said firmly. You did not panic, did not fall apart. You stayed calm and rational even when you thought you were going to die. That takes real strength. I was terrified, Garrett admitted. Being brave does not mean you are not scared, Sam said. It means you do what needs to be done despite the fear. That is what you did. They talked for another hour there in the paddock, reluctant to end the conversation and return to their separate sleeping quarters. Finally, Sarah came looking for Garrett, calling her name across the yard. I should go, Garrett said reluctantly. Sarah will worry. Tomorrow then, Sam said. I will talk to Morrison in the morning, make it official. Tomorrow, Garrett agreed, and with one last squeeze of his hand, she walked away to join Sarah. Her friend immediately linked arms with her as they walked back toward the house. So, Sarah said, her voice full of knowing amusement, that cowboy who saved you seems quite taken with you. Sarah? Garrett protested, but she could not help smiling. Do not even try to deny it, Sarah said. I saw the way you two were looking at each other at dinner, and then you disappear outside for an hour. What am I supposed to think? He is thinking about staying on here, Garrett said, taking the job your father offered. Because of you, Sarah said, and it was not a question. Maybe, Garrett admitted. Is that crazy? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. My parents met during a blizzard, she said finally. Ma was stranded at a way station, and Pa was one of the men who dug through to rescue them. They married 3 weeks later, and were together for 40 years until Ma passed. Sometimes the best things happen in the strangest ways. 3 weeks? Garrett repeated, her eyes wide. 3 weeks, Sarah confirmed, and they were the happiest couple I ever knew. So, no, I do not think it is crazy at all. I think when you know, you know. The question is, do you know? Did she know? Garrett thought about it as she got ready for bed that night, lying in the small room off the kitchen that Sarah's family always let her use when she stayed over. She thought about the feeling of safety she had experienced in Sam's arms during that harrowing ride through the flames. She thought about the ease of their conversation, the way he listened like her words actually mattered. She thought about the promise he had made and kept, about the determination in his eyes when he had found her trapped and afraid. Yes, she thought, as she finally drifted off to sleep. Yes, I know. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The entire community came together to help those who had lost everything in the fire. Neighbors pitched in to rebuild barns, replace fencing, and salvage what could be saved from the charred landscape. Sam took the job at the Morrison Ranch, and Garrett found herself working alongside him nearly every day. They were careful not to be too obvious about their growing feelings, both of them aware that such a rapid attachment might raise eyebrows. But it was impossible to hide entirely. The way Sam's eyes sought her out whenever they were in the same space, the way Garrett found excuses to work near him, the way they seemed to communicate without words after just a few days. People noticed. Thomas Morrison noticed, and after about a week, he pulled Garrett aside one evening after supper. I am not a man who meddles in other people's business, he said without preamble. But you are like family to me, Garrett, have been since you started working here. So, I am going to say my piece, and then I will leave it alone. All right, Garrett said cautiously. Sam Quincy seems like a good man, Thomas said. Works hard, does not complain, knows his way around horses better than anyone I have seen. But he is also a drifter, someone who has never stayed in one place for long. You understand what I'm saying? I do, Garrett said. But he is staying now. He told me himself that he is tired of wandering. People say a lot of things, Thomas said, not unkindly. I just want you to be careful. You have had enough loss in your life. I do not want to see you hurt. I appreciate your concern, Garrett said, meaning it. But I have to take this chance. Sam is different. I know everyone probably thinks I am foolish, that I am rushing into something I will regret. But Thomas, I have never felt this way about anyone. And I hope, he feels the same. Thomas studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right then. But if he ever gives you cause to doubt him, you come to me. Understood? Understood, Garrett agreed, grateful for his protective instinct, even as she felt confident she would never need to take him up on his offer. As the weeks turned into a month, and then 2 months, Garrett's certainty only grew. Sam proved himself over and over, not just as a skilled ranch hand, but as a man of his word. He worked from dawn until dusk, taking on the hardest jobs without complaint. He was kind to the other workers, respectful to the Morrisons, and gentle with the animals. And with Garrett, he was everything she had never dared to hope for. They stole moments together whenever they could, early morning rides to check the fence lines, where they would talk about everything and nothing. Evening walks after supper, when the work was done and the world seemed to slow down just for them. Sundays, when most of the ranch hands went into town, they would pack a lunch and ride out to a meadow Sam had discovered, a place that had somehow escaped the fire's destruction, where wildflowers still bloomed and the grass was green. It was in that meadow, on a brilliant October afternoon, with the aspens turning gold around them, that Sam kissed her for the first time. They had been sitting side by side, watching midnight graze nearby, talking about their childhoods. Sam had been telling her about learning to ride from his oldest brother, and somehow the conversation had drifted into comfortable silence. Garrett had been acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the warmth of his shoulder brushing against hers, of the way his voice made her feel safe and cherished. When she turned to look at him, she found him already watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her breath catch. "Garrett," he said softly, and then he was leaning in, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. But pulling away was the last thing on her mind. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope and all the feelings they had been carefully building over the past 2 months. When they finally pulled apart, Sam rested his forehead against hers, his hand cupping her cheek. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it might seem too soon, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you, Garrett Grayson." "I love you too," Garrett replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I have loved you since that night in the creek bed when you promised I would see morning." "Best promise I ever made," Sam said, and then he was kissing her again. And Garrett felt like she was flying and falling and standing on solid ground all at once. After that, they stopped trying to hide their feelings. They were not inappropriate, both of them too respectful of the Morrisons and the other workers to engage in public displays of affection, but they stopped pretending they were just friends, stopped being so careful about standing too close or talking too long. The other ranch hands teased them good-naturedly, and Sarah was thrilled, having known all along how things would turn out. In November, Sam asked Thomas Morrison for permission to court Garrett officially. It was an old-fashioned gesture, but one that Thomas appreciated. He gave his blessing readily, having seen over the past 3 months that Sam was serious about staying, serious about building a life in Hill City, serious about Garrett. "I was wrong about you, boy," Thomas said, shaking Sam's hand. "You have proved you are more than just a drifter. You are a man worth trusting. You take care of her, you hear?" "With my life," Sam promised, and Thomas believed him. December brought the first real snow, blanketing the Black Hills in white and covering the last visible scars of the fire. On Christmas Eve, Sam took Garrett back to their meadow. She did not understand why at first. It was freezing cold, and the ground was covered in snow. But when they arrived, she saw that Sam had spent time here earlier. There was a small fire burning safely in a circle of stones, with blankets laid out beside it. "Sam, what is this?" Garrett asked, enchanted despite the cold. "Garrett," Sam began, and she heard the nervousness in his voice. "5 months ago, I rode through fire to save your life, and in doing so, you saved mine. You gave me a reason to stop running, a place to call home, a future I could actually imagine." He dropped to one knee in the snow, pulling a small box from his pocket. When he opened it, Garrett saw a simple gold band with a small, perfect diamond set in the center. "I know we have not been together long," Sam continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "but I also know that I want to spend every day I have left on this earth by your side. I want to wake up next to you, work alongside you, build a life with you. Garrett Grayson, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Garrett's face, freezing on her cheeks in the winter air. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Sam stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and love that had been building between them since that first desperate night when he had promised her she would see morning. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would see many, many mornings with this man, and every one of them would be a gift. They married in late February of 1884, on a clear, cold day when the world seemed crystallized in ice and beauty. The ceremony took place in Hill City's small church, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Sarah was Garrett's maid of honor, and one of Sam's fellow ranch hands stood up as his best man. Thomas Morrison walked Garrett down the aisle, and when he placed her hand in Sam's, there were tears in his eyes. The Reverend Mitchell, who had baptized Sarah Morrison as a baby and had been in Hill City since before it was officially a town, performed the ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Sam's voice was strong and clear. I, Samuel Quincy, take you, Garrett Grayson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you in times of plenty and in times of want, in times of joy and in times of sorrow, in times of peace and in times of trial. I promise to stand by your side, to support your dreams, to honor your strength, and to cherish your heart. As I promised you that night when fire raged around us that you would see morning, I now promise you that every morning for the rest of my life, I will be there beside you. This I swear on my name and before God. Garrett's own vows were no less heartfelt. I, Garrett Grayson, take you, Samuel Quincy, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all that I am and all that I will become. I promise to be your partner in all things, to share in your burdens and your victories, to offer you comfort in difficult times and celebrate with you in good times. You came into my life when I needed someone most, and you have been my safe harbor ever since. I vow to be yours as you are mine, from this day until my last day. When Reverend Mitchell pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Sam kissed Garrett thoroughly, not caring that they had an audience, and she kissed him back with equal enthusiasm. They were married. They belonged to each other now, officially and forever. The reception was held at the Morrison Ranch, where Sarah and several of the town women had spent days preparing food and decorating the barn. There was dancing and music, with someone producing a fiddle and another a harmonica. Sam and Garrett danced their first dance as husband and wife to a lively tune that had everyone clapping along, and then they danced with various townspeople until Garrett's feet hurt and Sam's face hurt from smiling so much. Late in the evening, Thomas Morrison stood up and called for everyone's attention. I have an announcement to make, he said, his booming voice carrying easily over the crowd. As some of you know, I have been looking to reduce my responsibilities here at the ranch. I am not getting any younger, and while I'm not ready to retire completely, I want to slow down a bit. He paused, letting the suspense build, and Garrett wondered where this was going. Sam Quincy has proven himself to be one of the finest horsemen and most dedicated workers I have ever had the privilege of employing, Thomas continued. And Garrett, well, she has been like a daughter to me for years now, so it gives me great pleasure to offer them the foreman position here at the ranch, managing the day-to-day operations. They will have a house on the property, a good salary, and a share in the ranch profits. The barn erupted in applause once again, and Garrett looked at Sam with wide eyes. A foreman position was a huge responsibility, but it also meant stability, respect, a real future. Sam looked just as stunned as she felt, but he quickly recovered and stood to address the crowd. Mr. Morrison, we do not know what to say, Sam said. This is beyond generous. You have earned it, Thomas said firmly. Both of you. Now say you will accept so we can get back to celebrating. We accept, Garrett said quickly, before the opportunity could somehow slip away. Thank you, Thomas, for everything. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. Finally, well after midnight, Sam and Garrett made their escape. Thomas had given them a week away from work for a honeymoon, and they had decided to spend it in the small house that would now be theirs, which sat about a quarter mile from the main ranch buildings. It was a simple structure, just 3 rooms, but it had a solid roof, a good stove, and most importantly, it was theirs. That first night in their own home, in their own bed, was everything Garrett had dreamed of and more. Sam was tender and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. They came together with a passion born of months of restraint and longing, and afterward, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Garrett felt a sense of peace and completeness she had not known since before her parents died. I cannot believe this is real, she whispered against Sam's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 6 months ago, I was alone, just drifting from job to job with no real home or family. And now, I have all of this. I have you. You have me, Sam confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Forever, Garrett. I am not going anywhere." "Good," she said, tilting her head up to kiss him, "because I am holding you to that promise. You promised me I would see morning, and I intend to see thousands of mornings with you." "Thousands," Sam agreed, "starting with tomorrow." The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching never was. There were harsh winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and horses that went lame, predators that took livestock, and markets that fluctuated wildly. But Sam and Garrett faced every challenge together, and somehow that made even the hard times bearable. As foreman, Sam proved to have a gift for management. He was firm but fair with the workers, and he had an intuitive understanding of what the ranch needed at any given time. Garrett worked alongside him, handling the books and records, managing supplies, and helping with the actual ranch work whenever extra hands were needed. They made a formidable team, and under their leadership, the Morrison Ranch thrived. In the spring of 1885, Garrett discovered she was pregnant. She told Sam one evening as they sat on the porch of their little house, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and pink. She had been nervous about how he would react, unsure if he was ready for children so soon. But when she told him, his face lit up with such pure joy that all her worries evaporated. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Garrett, we are going to have a baby." "You are happy then?" she asked, even though his reaction had made it obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Sam said. "You have given me everything, Garrett. A home, a purpose, a love I never thought I would find, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in early December, just before Christmas, after a long and difficult labor that left Sam pacing anxiously outside the room where the town's midwife attended to Garrett. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly broke down the door in his haste to get to his wife. "You have a son," the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, announced with a tired smile. "A big, healthy boy." Sam rushed to Garrett's side, taking in her exhausted but radiant face, and then looking down at the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was wailing lustily, his little face red with indignation at being thrust into the cold world. "He is perfect," Sam breathed, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his son's impossibly small hand. Immediately, the baby's fingers wrapped around Sam's, and Sam felt his heart swell to what felt like twice its normal size. "What should we name him?" Garrett asked, looking up at her husband with love shining in her eyes. Sam thought for a moment. "What about William? After your father?" Garrett's eyes filled with tears. Her father's name had been William, and she had not expected Sam to remember or to suggest honoring him this way. "William," she repeated softly. "William Quincy. It is perfect. Thank you, Sam." "He was your father," Sam said. "He made you who you are. It seems right that our son should carry his name." William was an easy baby, much to their relief. He ate well, slept reasonably well, and seemed to enjoy watching the world around him with alert, curious eyes. Sam was a devoted father, coming in from work every day eager to hold his son, talking to him constantly, even though William was too young to understand words. Garrett would often find them together, Sam telling the baby about the horses or the ranch or his dreams for their future. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and Sam and Garrett's reputation as skilled managers spread throughout the territory. Thomas Morrison stepped back more and more from the daily operations, though he remained involved in major decisions. Sarah married a local shopkeeper named Henry Walsh in 1886, and she and Garrett remained as close as ever, their children growing up together. In 1887, Garrett gave birth to a daughter they named Lily, a tiny girl with her mother's red hair and her father's dark eyes. William, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. Sam was just as devoted to his daughter as he had been to his son, proving himself to be the kind of father who saw no difference between boys and girls when it came to love and attention. It was a cold January evening in 1888, almost 5 years after the fire that had brought them together, when Garrett and Sam found themselves sitting on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill. The children were asleep inside, and the ranch was quiet, blanketed in fresh snow that glittered under the light of a full moon. "Do you remember the night we met?" Garrett asked, not for the first time. It had become something of a tradition between them, recounting that harrowing night and marveling at how it had changed both their lives. "Every detail," Sam said, pulling her closer. "The smell of smoke, the roar of the flames, the fear in your eyes when I first found you. And then the ride through the fire, not knowing if we would make it. The hours in the creek bed, just talking, learning about you. I think I started falling in love with you that very night, even though I did not want to admit it." "I did too," Garrett confessed. "There was something about the way you looked at me, the absolute certainty in your voice when you promised I would see morning. No one had ever made me feel that safe, that protected. And then, as we talked, I realized you were not just brave, you were kind and thoughtful, and everything I had been looking for, without even knowing I was looking." "Best night of my life," Sam said, "even with the terror and the danger, because it led to all of this." He gestured at their house, at the land around them, at everything they had built together. "I love you, Samuel Quincy," Garrett said, turning to kiss him. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for all the mornings we have shared." "I love you too," Sam replied, "and I will keep that promise every day for the rest of our lives. You will see every morning, and I will be there beside you for each one." As if to punctuate his words, the first light of dawn began to appear on the eastern horizon, chasing away the stars and painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Sam and Garrett sat together, watching the sunrise, their hands clasped, their hearts full. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. William grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and showed early signs of having his father's gift with horses. Lily was bright and fearless, always getting into mischief, but charming her way out of trouble with a smile that could melt the sternest heart. In 1890, Thomas Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. It was a sad time for everyone who had known him, but especially for Garrett and Sam, who owed him so much. In his will, Thomas left the ranch to Sarah, but with the stipulation that Sam and Garrett would continue as managers with a 40% ownership stake. It was a generous legacy that secured their family's future. Sarah, who had never had much interest in ranching, was happy with the arrangement. She and Henry had their own businesses in town, and she trusted Sam and Garrett completely to run the ranch. The three of them met regularly to discuss major decisions, but for the most part, Sam and Garrett had free rein to manage things as they saw fit. In 1892, Garrett gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas, in honor of the man who had been like a father to both of them. By this time, William was 7 and Lily was 5, and they were both excited to have another sibling. The house felt full and loud and chaotic and perfect. Sam and Garrett added on to their house over the years, expanding it to accommodate their growing family. They built a larger porch where they could sit on summer evenings and watch their children play. They planted a garden that Garrett tended with care, growing vegetables for their table and flowers just because she loved the color they brought to the harsh landscape. The ranch itself continued to grow and evolve. Sam introduced new breeding techniques he had learned from other horsemen, developing a reputation for producing some of the finest working horses in South Dakota. Garrett proved to have a head for business, negotiating favorable contracts and keeping detailed records that made it easy to track which ventures were profitable and which needed to be adjusted. Their partnership, both in marriage and in work, was the foundation of everything they built. They rarely fought, having learned early on to communicate openly and honestly with each other. When disagreements did arise, they talked them through until they found a compromise both could live with. They respected each other's opinions, valued each other's strengths, and supported each other through weaknesses. In 1895, when William was 10, Sam began teaching him in earnest about ranching and horse training. The boy took to it naturally, spending every free moment at his father's side, absorbing everything Sam could teach him. Lily, not to be left out, insisted on learning too, and Sam taught both his children equally, never once suggesting that ranching was not appropriate work for a girl. Garrett watched her husband with their children and fell in love with him all over again. He was patient and encouraging, celebrating their successes and helping them learn from their failures. He taught them to be honest, to work hard, to treat others with respect, and to keep their promises. All the values that had made him the man Garrett had fallen in love with, he was now passing on to the next generation. As the century turned and 1900 arrived, Sam and Garrett found themselves approaching middle age. Sam was 42 now, with silver threading through his dark hair, though he was still as strong and capable as ever. Garrett was 39, with laugh lines around her eyes and a few more pounds than she had carried in her youth, but still beautiful to Sam's eyes. Their oldest son, William, was 15, a young man poised on the edge of adulthood. Lily was 13, navigating the complicated transition from girl to young woman. And young Thomas was 8, a ball of energy who kept them all on their toes. On a warm summer evening in June of 1900, the family gathered on the porch after supper. It had become a tradition over the years, this time when they would all sit together and talk about their days, share stories, and simply enjoy each other's company. Tonight, William had news. "I have been thinking," he began, a little nervously. "About my future, I mean. I know you both have been grooming me to take over the ranch someday, and I am grateful for that. But I was wondering if it might be possible for me to spend some time learning from other ranchers, too. Maybe travel a bit, see how things are done in other places, before I settle down here permanently." Garrett's first instinct was to say no, to keep her firstborn close and safe. But she saw Sam nod slowly, thoughtfully, and she bit back her immediate reaction. "That is a smart idea," Sam said. "I learned a lot from drifting when I was young, seeing different places and different ways of doing things. It made me a better horseman and a better rancher. As long as you promise to come back home, I think some travel would be good for you." "I promise," William said earnestly. "This is my home. I just want to see a bit of the world first, and learn everything I can so I can bring that knowledge back here." "Then you have our blessing," Garrett said, even though her heart ached at the thought of her son leaving. "When were you thinking of going?" "Maybe next spring," William suggested, "after the winter work is done, but before the summer rush starts." "That gives us almost a year to prepare," Sam said. "We can write to some ranchers I know, set up places for you to work and learn. It will be a good experience, son." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Garrett leaned against Sam's shoulder as they sat on the porch in the darkness. "He is growing up," she said softly. "In just a few more years, he will be a man." "He is already more of a man than many twice his age," Sam said. "You have done well with him, Garrett, with all of them." "We have done well," Garrett corrected. "This is not my achievement alone. You are just as much their parent as I am, Sam. They are who they are because of both of us." "Then we make a good team," Sam said, kissing the top of her head. "Like we always have." In the spring of 1901, William set off on his journey. It was harder than Garrett had expected. Watching her son ride away on a horse Sam had trained specially for him, his saddlebags packed with supplies and letters of introduction. But she held back her tears until he was out of sight, then let Sam hold her while she cried. "He will be fine," Sam assured her. "He is smart and capable, and he knows he has a home to come back to. That makes all the difference." And Sam was right. William wrote regularly, his letters full of descriptions of the places he was seeing and the things he was learning. He worked his way through Wyoming and Colorado, then down into New Mexico and Texas. He learned about cattle drives and sheep ranching, about desert survival and mountain trails. And true to his word, after 2 years of traveling, he came home. The young man who rode back into the ranch in the summer of 1903 was different from the boy who had left. He was taller, broader in the shoulders, with a new confidence in his bearing. But his smile was the same, and when he hugged his mother, Garrett knew that her son had not changed in the ways that mattered most. "Welcome home," she said, holding him tight. "It is good to be back," William said. "I learned a lot out there, Ma, but I also learned that this is where I belong, this ranch, this land, this family. I am ready to settle down and help you build this place into something even greater." Sam clapped his son on the shoulder, pride evident in every line of his face. "Then let us get to work," he said. With William back and invested in the ranch's future, Sam and Garrett began to think about their own futures. They were in their 40s now, not old by any means, but no longer young either. They had built something lasting, something that would continue after they were gone, and they had raised children who would carry on their values and their work. On the 20th anniversary of the fire that had brought them together, Sam took Garrett back to the creek bed where they had sheltered that terrible night. Someone, probably Sam himself, had placed a marker there, a simple stone with words carved into it. Here 2 lives were saved and 1 love was born. August 1883. Garrett read the words and felt tears spring to her eyes. "When did you do this?" she asked. Last month, Sam admitted. I wanted to mark the place, to make sure it was remembered. That night changed everything for me, Garrett. It gave me you, and through you, it gave me a life worth living. You gave me the same, Garrett said. You kept your promise, Sam. I saw morning that day, and I have seen every morning since with you by my side, and every one of them has been a gift. They stood together in that place where their story had truly begun, holding each other as they had held each other that first night 20 years earlier. The creek bed was different now. Vegetation had grown back, softening the harsh lines. A small stream ran through it, fed by winter snows and spring rains. But the essence of the place remained, a testament to survival and hope, and the unexpected ways love can find us. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Garrett thought about everything they had built together, the ranch that had become one of the most successful in the Black Hills, the children who were growing into fine adults, the respect they had earned from their community, the love that had only deepened and strengthened with each passing year. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, reading the contemplative look on her face. "About how lucky I am," Garrett said. "About how a single night, one terrible and terrifying night, led to all of this. About how you rode through fire to save me, and how I would do the same for you in a heartbeat." "Let us hope it never comes to that," Sam said with a slight smile. "I think one wildfire in a lifetime is quite enough." "Agreed," Garrett laughed. "But you know what I mean. I would do anything for you, Sam. You are my heart." "And you are mine," Sam said. "Always and forever, Garrett. That is a promise I will keep until my last breath." The years continued to pass in a steady, satisfying rhythm. William met a young woman named Elizabeth Foster at a church social in 1904 and courted her properly for a year before asking for her hand in marriage. They weighed in 1905, and Garrett and Sam became grandparents for the first time in 1906, when Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter named Rose. Lily proved to have her mother's independent streak. She announced at 18 that she wanted to go to teaching college in Rapid City, shocking the family, but also making them proud. Sam and Garrett supported her decision, even though it meant another child leaving home. She became a teacher and eventually married a fellow teacher named David Morrison, no relation to their old friend Thomas, in 1910. Young Thomas, true to his namesake's memory, showed an interest in the business side of ranching. While he learned the practical work from his father and brother, he also studied accounting and business management, bringing modern practices to the ranch that increased efficiency and profitability. By 1915, Sam and Garrett were in their mid-50s, officially transitioning more of the daily operations to William while they took on advisory roles. They were not ready to retire completely, but they enjoyed having more time to spend with their growing number of grandchildren and to simply be together. On quiet evenings, they would still sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the hills they had called home for more than 3 decades. They would talk about the early days, about the fire and the creek bed, about the nervous excitement of their courtship and the joy of their wedding day. They would talk about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the community, about everything and nothing. "Do you have any regrets?" Garrett asked Sam one evening, a question she had never asked before. Sam was quiet for a long moment, considering. "No," he finally said. "Not a single one. My life before Hill City was just marking time, waiting for something real to happen. And then that fire came, and you were there, and everything changed. Every choice I made after that night led me here, to this porch, with you beside me. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same," Garrett said. "Even the hard times, the struggles and the losses, they were all part of the journey that brought us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." In 1920, on their 36th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren surprised them with a party at the ranch. Friends came from all over the Black Hills to celebrate the couple who had become something of a local legend. The story of their meeting, of Sam riding through fire to save Garrett, and then falling in love in a creek bed while flames raged around them, had been told and retold until it had taken on the quality of a myth. But Sam and Garrett knew it was no myth. It was their truth, their history, the foundation of everything they had become. Late in the evening, after the guests had left and the grandchildren had been put to bed, the family gathered on the porch. William and Elizabeth, Lily and David, Thomas and his new wife Martha, 3 grown children with their spouses, all of them looking at Sam and Garrett with love and respect. You two set quite an example for us, William said, speaking for all of them. Watching you work together, support each other, love each other through all these years. You taught us what marriage should be, what partnership means. We are all grateful for that. We just lived our lives, Sam said humbly. There was no grand plan, no secret formula. We just loved each other and tried to do right by each other every day. That is the secret formula, Lily said with a smile. Love and commitment and showing up day after day. You made it look easy, even when we were old enough to know it was not. It was easy, Garrett said, taking Sam's hand. Loving your father has always been the easiest thing I have ever done. As their children and their spouses said their goodnights and headed to their own homes, Sam and Garrett remained on the porch, as they had so many thousands of nights before. The stars were bright overhead, the air was soft with the warmth of summer, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. 36 years, Garrett mused. When you promised me I would see morning, did you have any idea it would lead to this? I hoped, Sam admitted. Even in that moment, even when I barely knew you, I felt something, a connection, a possibility. And then in the creek bed, talking to you, learning who you were, that hope became certainty. I knew, somehow I just knew, that you were meant to be part of my life. Fate, Garrett said. Sarah's mother always said that the universe puts people in our path for a reason. You were put in my path that night, and I was put in yours. Then I am grateful to whatever force brought us together, Sam said. Every morning I wake up next to you is a morning worth waking up for. Every day with you is a day well spent. You old romantic, Garrett teased gently, but her eyes were wet with happy tears. You bring it out in me, Sam said, pulling her close and kissing her temple. You always have. They sat in comfortable silence after that, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the night deepen around them. So many mornings they had seen together, just as Sam had promised. So many days and nights and years, building a life brick by brick, moment by moment. And through it all, the love that had sparked to life in a creek bed while fire raged around them had never dimmed, never faltered, never wavered. In 1925, Sam and Garrett celebrated their 65th and 62nd birthdays respectively. They were true elders now, with silver hair and lines on their faces earned through decades of outdoor work and laughter and life fully lived. Their bodies moved more slowly than they once had, but their minds remained sharp and their love for each other remained as strong as ever. William now ran the ranch entirely, with help from Thomas and his son, Sam's grandson and namesake, young Samuel. Lily had retired from teaching and spent her time writing a book about the history of Hill City and the Black Hills region. The ranch had expanded significantly over the years and was now one of the most respected operations in South Dakota. On a warm September evening, Sam took Garrett for a ride, just the two of them on gentle horses, moving at an easy pace through familiar terrain. They rode to the meadow where Sam had proposed all those years ago, where wildflowers still bloomed every summer, in defiance of the harsh climate. They dismounted and sat in the grass, and Sam pulled out a basket he had packed earlier. There was bread and cheese, apples from their own trees, and a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. "What are we celebrating?" Garrett asked, though she was smiling, delighted by the surprise. "Us," Sam said simply. "Every day with you is worth celebrating, but today especially. Do you know what today is?" Garrett thought for a moment, running through dates in her mind, and then she remembered. "It is 42 years, she said softly. 42 years since the fire, since you found me and saved me. 42 years since my real life began," Sam corrected. "Since I found my purpose, my home, my heart. I wanted to mark the occasion, just the two of us, in this place that has always been special to us." They shared the simple meal, talking about their decades together, remembering the highlights, and even some of the low points that had tested them but never broken them. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they would leave behind, about the future of the ranch and the family. "We did all right, did we not?" Garrett asked, leaning back against Sam's shoulder as the sun began to set. "Better than all right," Sam said. "We built something real, something lasting, and we did it together, just like we have done everything." "I love you, Samuel Quincy," Garrett said, the same words she had spoken thousands of times over the years, but which never lost their meaning. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for every morning." "I love you, Garrett Quincy," Sam replied, kissing her softly. And I will keep that promise until there are no more mornings to give you. You are my everything." As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, they packed up their picnic and rode slowly home. The ranch house lights were visible in the distance, warm and welcoming, a beacon guiding them back to the life they had built. Their children and grandchildren were there, the next generation already beginning to take up the mantle of responsibility. The ranch would continue, the family would grow, and the story of Sam and Garrett, of the cowboy who rode through fire to save the woman he would love for a lifetime, would be passed down through the generations. They stabled the horses together, moving through the familiar routine with practiced ease. Then, hand in hand, they walked to their house, the same house they had moved into as newlyweds more than 40 years earlier. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but the bones of it were the same, and it still felt like home. That night, as they lay in bed together, Garrett thought about all the mornings she had seen since that first desperate night when Sam had promised her she would survive. Thousands of mornings, each one a gift, each one spent with the man who had become not just her husband but her partner, her best friend, her soul's companion. "Sam," she whispered in the darkness. "Yes, love? I am glad you found me that night. I am glad you rode through fire for me. I am glad for every choice that led us to each other." "So am I," Sam said, pulling her closer. "Now and always, Garrett. Now and always." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had thousands of nights before. And when morning came, as morning always did, they woke together to face another day, another sunrise, another gift of time in a life well lived and a love well earned. Sam and Garrett would continue to see mornings together for many more years, each one precious, each one a fulfillment of the promise made so long ago when fire raged around them, and a cowboy's determination and a woman's courage forged a bond that would last a lifetime. They had built their happily ever after, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And in doing so, they had created something beautiful and enduring that would echo through the generations long after they were gone. Their love story, born in fire and tempered by time, remained a testament to the power of keeping promises, the strength of true partnership, and the enduring magic of two hearts choosing each other over and over again through all the mornings of their lives.